All right, everybody. Welcome to Porn Rewire. I'm Coach Zack. Before we begin, please click the subscribe or follow button so you can keep getting material on ways that you can continue to overcome porn addiction. Today, I'm super excited. I'm speaking with Chandler over at Relay. This is the first time we're meeting today, and so I'm really excited to talk about the accountability app that he has. So it looks like I've done a little research. It looks like it helps with various addictions, various issues, and it also has a habit tracker. So if you're trying to improve yourself in the new year, boom, you got yourself a habit tracker. So Chandler, thanks for joining us today, man.
Hey, thanks, Zach. Happy to be here, man.
Great. Well, tell me and the audience a little bit about yourself. How did you start this business? How did you start this app?
Yeah.
Why? All that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I guess to take it back to the why, I'm working on this right now. It goes back to my childhood. So I grew up the oldest of five kids, and in a family that was predominantly Christian, very religious, and really just had this sense of morals instilled in us from an early age. And unlike a lot of friends that I've talked to kind of about the issue of pornography, my parents were actually pretty open about it in our household and talked to us about the potential dangers and really just encouraged it to be a non-stigmatized thing that we could go to them about with questions to try to help keep us safe. And so from an early age, I actually, remember these conversations about the harm of pornography and how, it's not something that needs to be super shameful. And I can go to them and talk to them if it's ever something that kind of crosses paths into my life. And so
That's interesting that they tried to keep the shame out of it, which is good.
yeah, it was actually in, I don't remember the details of these conversations, but I think they really did. Like, I think they realized that that the shame is something with any type of issue that makes it more difficult. But I remember when I was first exposed, I was 14, and I think it had kind of started to become a habit before I really realized, I think 100% what was going on. And I think even with these conversations, I remember the moment that I realized, like, oh crap, I think I'm struggling with this, or I think how am I in a position where, just a year ago or a few months ago, this was something that I never had sought out. And now it was something that I guess, just kind of my curiosity being piqued throughout puberty really is kind of what I guess led me down that path. And before I knew it, my initial attempts to leave it behind me were unsuccessful, and
I'm
started
sure
to
there are a lot of people listening that can relate to that.
oh yeah,
A
started
lot
to
of
freak
failed
out a
attempts.
little. I'm like, what does this mean? Why
Yeah.
can't I I'm deciding that I don't want this in my
I'm such
life.
a bad
Why?
person.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's totally what happened. Is it really impacted my view of myself. And I think I was this kid who just had this natural desire to be a good person and to achieve, in different areas of my life. I always did well in school and sports. And so to have this thing that, like, I now, felt like I was failing at, I couldn't control, I was not doing well at in my own eyes, really impacted my self-esteem. And I think my relationship with my family members. And even though we had had those conversations, I didn't want to tell them. That thought didn't even cross my mind. I was like, well, I'll just try harder because that formula works, I guess, in other areas of life. Probably
Yeah,
wasn't,
right,
that logical of a conversation, but that's kind of what happens. So I get into this cycle that, so
right.
many of us do of,
Mm,
months go by, and now I think, years started to go
mm,
by of, like,
mm,
trying to get this under control, but it felt like the harder I pushed against it, the worse it got.
yeah.
And I really didn't have any of these tools to unpack, I think, the misconceptions that were going on in my mind, the
Mm.
cognitive distortions, the shame that I had certainly started to accumulate. And I
So
really needed,
what were some methods you had tried and they didn't really work?
well,
Was it
to this
just
point,
pure white knuckling? Yeah, up to this
pure
point.
pure white knuckling, right? Like, this
Mm,
was to this point. And so the story starts to change when I realized that 2 years of pure white knuckling was a really ineffective
mm,
strategy of, like, okay, I realize I'm not really trying much different in terms of my strategy here.
right.
And I think it was this gradual dawning of, like, well, maybe I should explore different things to try at all. Like, I wasn't even thinking about I need to try different things. I was just
Mm,
like, for a while, like, this can stop, right?
mm.
Well, no, it's not. um,
So
and
what did you start trying? So you're like, okay,
yeah,
I've been trying the white knuckling, trying pure will. It's not
yeah.
working out for me. Where
Well,
do I go?
I don't know how it happened, but my mom approached me, and I don't know what inspired a 16, 17-year-old boy to like be honest and have a conversation with his mom about this. But
At
I talked to her.
16?
Yeah,
Dang.
yeah. So I
Okay.
was a junior in high school by this point,
Okay.
and yeah, she was like, "Hey, like I just have the feeling that I need to ask you, but you know, is pornography something that you've ever struggled with? And if so, I hope you
Mm,
know that like you can talk to me about it, but I just felt like I should ask you about how you're doing with that."
mm,
And I was like, I'm really struggling with it, and didn't just talk to her about it. And I remember she like felt really bad about herself. I remember she didn't blow up at me.
mm.
It was all about like, have I failed as a parent? And
Yeah.
those previous
She's like, I'm a
conversations
I'm a
make
bad
me,
mom.
yeah, it
Like,
got
it's not
kind of
about you,
dramatic.
mom.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was like, Mom,
Yeah.
that actually I think did shift the mindset for me. It was like, wait a
Mm,
second. No, she's not a bad mother, and actually that probably means I'm not a bad person, but I
right.
probably just need to figure out some resources and strategies to
Right.
learn
Right.
how to manage this better. And
Mm.
so I ended up finding after that a local group-based program with other guys that are kind of late teens, early 20s. And
How did you
she
find that?
so I think she actually, my mom had come across it on like a Facebook ad or something. It was super random.
Interesting.
But she just like floated it my way. And I was like, at that point, I was really primed for that type of thing because I'd been struggling alone for so long. Even though
Mm,
I'd opened up to her about what I was dealing with, I really
mm.
like it didn't turn into like utilizing her as an effective accountability partner or as a
Right.
support system person, even.
Yeah.
Like I just
That
had
probably
this,
wouldn't have been a good idea.
yeah, it wouldn't have even been that good of an
Yeah.
idea,
Yeah.
but I think I realized like it would be nice to not do this alone and to have a good support system. Like that
Mm,
probably makes sense.
mm,
And so I remember it was over Zoom Thursday nights. We'd meet for 2 hours. A clinician was the one facilitating the program.
mm, mm.
And I think just like the very basic things in those first few meetings that changed the game for me were like number one, realizing that I didn't suck and I wasn't a terrible person because I struggle with this. And I think what actually helped me see that is when I saw like the other guys in this group and I got to
Yeah.
know them a little bit, I was like, wait a second, they're not like total losers. They actually seem
Hmm.
like pretty cool, normal people who are trying to have good lives.
Oh my
And
gosh. The first time you go to a meeting, you're like, are there going to be a bunch of trench coats and like
yeah,
dudes like
yeah,
smoking cigarettes
creepy.
and like,
Yeah,
and then the second thought is like, what if everyone's normal and I'm the weird one? And so
yeah,
like that's the other fear is like, oh no, when I go to this group, what are they going to think of me? Are they going to think am
totally,
I more twisted than they are? And so yeah, going to a
totally.
group meeting stuff, man. That first one's killer.
It's always scary. Yeah, and I think our anxiety kind of hypes up all the worst case scenarios. And almost anyone I've talked to, it's a similar story of it was not nearly as scary and it was actually a breath of fresh air and
Oh my
end up,
gosh.
forming some of your best relationships and friendships with these guys who are, all for the most part are really good people who are just, in a position where they need help and that's okay.
Right.
We all need help in different areas of our life.
Right.
And
Yeah, it's nuts.
yeah.
And what I saw, it would be interesting to hear. Like some of the guys that I thought like I didn't connect with in particular ended up being the guys I needed the most a year
Mm,
later when I'm like calling, I'm like, bro, I'm like craving porn like crazy right now. I needed to get it out. And like certain guys were like always there for me. They were like, man, you just would always show up, always answer if I needed it. And it's just interesting because it is a collection of like random personalities, but
yeah.
the vast majority of them tend not to be the weirdos that you
Yeah.
picture as
Oh
you
yeah.
head in a group.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for me, I realized like through some of those interactions of guys that I would connect with outside of group or even inside of group, I wouldn't have expected someone to have, an interesting insight or a problem that they had dealt with the week before that actually, I really related to or gave me some really good ideas of what I could focus on and do differently. And so where this connects into relay and how that all started is as I went through this group-based program, I ended up, making a lot of progress. And actually, as I went to college, I kind of came back at one point after doing, well for a period of time and kind of being in recovery, started struggling again. So kind of started to come back this time to a different group in a different state. I moved away from home for college and realized like over this series of years that I had attended group, this pattern of ebb and flow and how well I was utilizing my group. and starting to figure out that if left to its own devices, I could get very little out of my group if I just showed up and didn't do much with it. But if I really tried, both in that meeting and the 6 days that I wasn't meeting with them, I could get a lot of really critical value from having this good support system of other people in the same boat. And so what that looked like for us is we would try to self-organize these group chats or other systems that we could, call each other when we start feeling an urge, or report on kind of the smaller goals that we were working on throughout the week to stay kind of regulating our stressors and triggers, or managing our recovery.
Can I ask you a question just real quick? So when you would reach out to these, like you would call people if you were struggling. So I try to tell my clients this, like, it's like magic. Like for me, it'll be interesting to hear you. If you just tell somebody,
yes,
like, I'm not in a good place right now, the struggle usually stopped there for me, like for that day,
when you put it out there, surprisingly, it doesn't progress that much.
It's like, and I tell guys, there's like a few like advanced moves that if you get these moves right, like you're going to be successful. So like reaching out for help when you're not doing good, setting up blocks, blocks they're not an end all be all. Like most of us find ways around blocks. So you have to have like a bunch of different strategies. But I found like that, and if I stick my head in a cold shower, if I'm really struggling, like if my brain's on fire and I just stick the cold shower on and stick my neck in it, like that shuts things down like most of the time. So those were kind of my methods. But I'm glad you said that you said, like, I called people, I texted people, I reached out to people. Like, you got to do that, guys. If you're listening to this, you have to do that. Like, I don't know how you do this by yourself. I don't.
No,
I just don't know how you do this by yourself.
You really can't, right? And I think like everything you're talking about makes me think of this analogy of a toolkit, where it's important to have like these different types of tools that you've really mastered that you can pull out almost like with muscle memory. And I think a lot of those tools, are really more effective or dependent on having a support system or having other people that are in your corner. And so I started building my toolkit of learning how to reach out and learning how to like do these different things and involve my group. But I realized like a lot of the time the conversation would be like coming back to group and being like, I was really struggling on this day. Well, why didn't you reach out, man? None of us got a phone call. None of us got a text in the group chat, or it wasn't even like I had a strong urge, but I just was like feeling lazy and just like stressed this week because I just broke up with my girlfriend a few weeks ago, and I wasn't working my recovery, like whatever goals I'm working on, like I should have been. And so now I'm showing up and reporting to you guys that I essentially did nothing that I committed to over this past week. And it's like, well, like if we had, if you had let us know like 2 days into the week, we could have been like, oh man, like let's go grab lunch or like talk about it, and then get, could have gotten back on track. And so this,
sorry to interrupt, but the nice thing about the group, just being in a group, is if you can get like 2 or 3 people, one of the excuses that you can kind of eliminate is like, I've already called this guy like 32 times, so I feel kind of bad
putting
about
a burden. You're not putting a burden on the same person.
It's not just one person. If I have I have clients, and so like if I have a client that's reaching out to me through emails, like I'm struggling, like they're paying me to be able to do that, so it's never a burden. I'm like, yeah, dude, if you're gonna pay me to listen every single time, go for it. And so like I think a lot of times though, for like these kinds of groups, what's tough is you like pick your person. And so you need to pick like 2 or 3 people. And that way you just kind of cycle between the people. And that way that's not an excuse that you'll use. So just advanced methods for people who are thinking about going to groups. So sorry to interrupt.
No, for sure. So I realized like, hey, what if there were a tool that made it easier to develop all of these advanced methods that you're kind of talking about here? Like I get that all these things worked, and as someone who'd been in recovery for at that point only 5 or 6 years, but still years, right? Like I'd seen like how these things like reaching out and checking in and utilizing each other both to stay accountable, to stay connected, like how all these things could be so effective. I also realized that like it's really hard to do that. There's a lot of friction that keeps us from doing that. What if there was an app that made it easier to have that, whether I have an existing group or not. And
Mhm.
so when we were in college, a few friends and I essentially came together, and it started as just a class project at first and is now morphed into our full-time jobs that
Mm.
we've got this grand vision that we're really passionate about. But at the beginning, it was like, let's build an app that can help existing groups that are meeting once a week to do better at implementing these methods and these strategies that we're talking about between meetings, or like
Mm.
meeting with their therapist or their coach once a week. Like,
Mm.
what if there were an app that could kind of complement and not necessarily be a standalone program, but make
Mm.
some of this stuff easier, focusing on the peer support and accountability element?
Interesting. So the thought, because that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because I saw on the site that there isn't like meetings on the app.
Correct.
So
Correct.
but you want to use it as a supplement to meetings that are going on. And so it's like you attend meetings, and then here's the app that further connects you. It's an extra tool in the toolbox. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
cool. Cool,
Exactly.
cool.
So yeah, the assumption is like, people are maybe in two buckets. Bucket one is, I've got a program or a group or, some meeting in place that I am regularly attending. And
Mm.
maybe the other bucket of people is, I'm not quite ready for that yet, or I feel a little
Mm.
bit too scared to jump into that, but
Mm.
I know that this struggling alone thing is not super effective, but I'm
Right.
not quite ready to, show my face on a Zoom meeting or in person.
Right.
Relay is great for those people, and kind of this asynchronous way to start interacting with a group and getting the value of it
Mm.
without having to fully commit to meetings, which we do, want people to eventually get to that point. I think there's a lot of value in it. But if people are
Yeah.
already going to meetings, we are trying to solve this gap of, it's the sales pitch, I guess, is like, it's 10 times better than a group chat, because it's this recovery Swiss Army knife that between
Mm.
your meetings is meant to, like, for example, you and my group can see at any given time, as I'm using the app to check in and regulate like my stressors and triggers and how I'm feeling.
Mm.
Like, you, Zach, could come in and see, oh, it looks like Chandler checked in and he was feeling tired and stressed and anxious this morning.
Mm.
I may have not even picked up the phone to call you yet, whether I have a scheduled call or an unscheduled, opportunity to reach out to you and connect.
Mm.
So what we're seeing is a lot of these guys in the groups are seeing that, and they're kind of reaching out and saying, "Hey, man, it looks like you might be feeling off today. Feel free to let us know if you want to talk. I know you mentioned the other day, work was, causing a lot of stress on your plate, but make sure to check in and let us know how things are going." So
Mm.
reducing that friction and creating a level of transparency that helps groups be there for each other better. But also, like, as I'm doing that check-in and I'm indicating that I'm feeling off, whatever that is, the app helps detect that and suggests that I throw a red flag, which is
Mm.
basically like a one tap button that
Mm.
kind of sends out a notification to my group and says, "Hey,
Interesting.
Chandler's
He's not
feeling
doing
off.
so good.
Yeah, jump in and show some help." And so a lot of people that I talked to were like, "It's just so hard for me to pick up the phone and make that call." And we
Mm.
found that kind of this red flag of just one tap with the button is this, again, just a more approachable alternative to get
Mm.
people just acknowledging, raising the flag so that their group can know and
Mm.
jump in. And then often that might lead to me picking up the phone and making a full phone call.
Right.
Like, it makes that easier to implement that advanced strategy.
Well,
Uh,
and a
yeah.
background for maybe if people haven't been listening to videos like this in the past, they're like, well, what does it matter if the person's not feeling good? What does that have to do with pornography? And
Mhm.
essentially, where I think you're heading with it, probably what you learned, just like I did, just like my clients, just like a lot of people that watch these videos, is that your problem's not porn, bro. Like, your problem's not having a higher sex drive than anyone else. No, the problem is that life is hard, and
Yep.
you use this to make yourself feel better. And so when you're having a hard day and you're indicating this on this app, other people could say, oh snap, he's feeling lonely. Oh snap, he's feeling stressed. Oh snap, he's feeling bored. Like, we need to help out. So that's interesting. Yeah, you it sounds like you thought this through. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, and so I worked with a lot of the clinicians and therapists that I had worked with kind of through my
Mm.
journey, and just to the point that you're talking about, how porn's not really the issue. I was just talking the other day with this
Mm.
one therapist that I work with closely, and we were talking about how, like, with the brain, like, when we start to feel pain, the limbic system in the brain is trying to find a way to soothe that pain or to
Mm.
escape that pain. there's all sorts of options that the limbic system can go to, the brain is trying to tell us that we can do to relieve that pain or feel pleasure. There's healthy ways of doing that, and there's probably less healthy ways, pornography
Right.
being one of them.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's like being able to get the frontal lobe part of the brain engaged by identifying those things is really powerful. But then the app kind of helping then put that out there so that other people know and I can talk about it, almost makes it so that the limbic system is like, we shine a flashlight on it and it's like, hey, you're trying to manipulate, the frontal lobe part of my brain to escape this pain in a way that, we tell ourselves these irrational lies. Well, we're not just broken or, defective. This is kind of how the psychology of addiction works. And so
Right.
being able to snap out of it, like with the cold shower, with the reach out, it's not just that these are hacks, like they're actual things that are based in the neuropsychology. And I'm not the
That's right.
expert to have on the show to talk about it in depth, but
Mhm.
that's kind of the underlying principles is like with the community elements of it and the support group and Relay, how can we bring out some of those methods in a way in the
Right.
group setting that's a little easier when our brains don't want to do it.
That's right. Well, and I'm glad because as you might know, our channel talks about the brain a lot, and it talks about the neuroscience, and it talks about these things, and it's crazy that when you understand this stuff better, you realize that your brain is trying to manipulate you to do certain things, and maybe not even manipulate. Actually, that's not even a good word for it. Your brain is designed to try to help you survive. Okay,
Yeah.
it wants to help you out. And so it has found, okay, so there's a great book. I've mentioned it all the time. Sorry for everybody who's like, okay, he's going to talk about it again. It's because I love it. But Dopamine Nation by Anna Lemke, great book. I don't know if you've read it, but oh, dude, bro, read some Dopamine Nation by Anna Lemke. It literally starts out with a dude that builds a masturbation machine. Like that's how the book starts. It's crazy. It's awesome. Crazy. So she's helping this guy who's hooked on masturbation to the point where he's an engineer and he builds a masturbation machine. But what she talks about in the book is cortisol and dopamine. So cortisol and dopamine are located in the same area of the brain. If you don't want to say dopamine or cortisol, you can say pleasure and pain, right? The pleasure pain receptors are in the same place in the brain, and the brain just wants to feel normal. Like it just wants to have homeostasis, right? It doesn't want to be too hot, too cold. It wants to be just right, right? And so when we do something like a cold shower, that increases cortisol, which is the stress chemical. Okay. So in order to equal itself out, it has to give you a boost in dopamine, which is your pleasure chemical, right? And so when that happens, you need porn less because all the brain cared about was where's my dopamine? It doesn't care where it gets it. It just wants that dopamine. And so you can hijack that by doing difficult things. So if you work out, if you go for a run, that's what they call the runner's high, which I ran a marathon at one point. And I was like, I don't know about this runner's high. What are people talking about? Why didn't I feel the runner's high? Because I was watching freaking porn, dude. Because a runner's high doesn't feel as good as porn. And so, so what happens is that on the other end of things, if you watch porn, you get a huge hit of dopamine. So what does the brain have to do? It has to increase your cortisol by double the amount of dopamine that was in your brain. So that is the guilt. That's the shame. That's the grogginess. That's the stress. And it literally, that's why we have to stay away from this stuff, is because it makes everything worse. And so, yeah, Dopamine Nation, man, get on it. Get on it, bro. Do yourself a favor. We were talking about your app, and I got us off track for a second. But so you're basically trying to use this app as a supplement. And so one of the things I was thinking about that I think is super interesting. I'm curious on your end what your thoughts are on this, but like responsibility was the word I was looking for. So I have found that being responsible to other people in this line has helped me stay out of this, right? And one of the things I was thinking about that I think is so cool about you is that like you went a different direction than me. Like I suck at technology, man. I am not like a dude who likes things like computers and tools and
Mhm.
sports. Like, I'm just not that dude. And so I wanted to talk to people. Like, that's what I wanted to do, man. I wanted to talk to people. I want to give empathy. Like, I want to study and learn the information and communicate. I like teaching. I like conversations. But you went with, I want to help people through technology. So why? What drove you to that? Is this just a natural thing for you, or is this just like you just saw a need and you're like, let me go meet it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think like looking back at my childhood and growing up, like I got really interested, for example, like when I was like 5, maybe 4 years
Mhm.
old, we had like this old school computer game at our house. Like it was a disc he had to put in, and it was like a Lion King like typing game.
Okay.
Um, like I've always loved learning. Like I think that's something I've always been passionate about. But
Mm,
technology, I think, it was just like fascinating to me, and I just
mm,
remember being hooked on this thing. And I think by like the time I was like 7, I don't remember exactly how many words per minute I typed, but I typed probably better than most adults, just like objectively speaking, in terms of how early I was really trying to latch on to technology.
mhm,
And so I remember as I got older, like I was always interested in learning to code. But I guess seeing myself more as someone who is more of a people person, or interested in like business or leadership. I think those things all just kind of converged with my experience in recovery. I too saw how like a lot of this is centered in the connection element,
mm.
in actual
Oh
communication and
yeah.
human connection.
Mhm,
And as I become passionate about technology, my thinking was like, there's a lot of ways that technology prohibits us from experiencing real human connection and
mhm,
tapping into those principles. um, how could technology aid and help that? And so
mhm,
I think my stance, or how I've come to look at this from my unique interests and strengths, is I think technology can be a powerful way to unlock more of these opportunities for us to tap into connection and each other. And I think, examples like social media have kind of botched it and done it really wrong, where it's about capturing eyeballs and monetizing them for ad dollars.
mhm,
Um, I was a believer early on that, there can be more technological innovation in the recovery space that doesn't necessarily mean technology is actually solving the problem, but maybe it's making it easier for us as humans
mm,
to do those things that are really principles that have been around for a long time. And I
mm.
think that's part of it. Is nothing at Relay is really like a new principle that no one's been talking about. It's how do we package it into a tool that, yeah, in 2023, almost everyone and all of us have technology, and a lot of us, I think, with pornography especially, like I have felt this way, and I know many others have. That's like, well, I just want to ditch it and get it out of my life. And what if I could just never have a phone and a computer? Because that's the problem. And if I just didn't have that, I wouldn't struggle anymore.
Mm,
And I think bringing it back to, well, the problem really isn't pornography, and the problem for us actually isn't technology, and potentially there could be something healing, I think, about um, in this problem area of using technology for healing as opposed to the harm that it's been associated with. I
that's
don't know,
good,
just
man.
different various thoughts that have
No,
come
that's
to.
great. Yeah, well, and what I tell a lot of guys is that the things that are going to keep you out of this is accountability and responsibility. Do you feel like being in this field, running this kind of technology, having to do talks like this kind of helps keep you out of this stuff? Do you feel like it helps you?
Oh yeah, I mean, I feel like in some ways, I feel like this is still me in my recovery journey. Like, I
Mm,
think one of the biggest things that I've learned is, like, for me personally, I feel like choosing to find ways to start helping others on the recovery journey. Relay,
mhm,
I guess, being the biggest example of starting this
mhm,
company. But I mean, even before that, like my wife and I, I guess when we were dating, actually, um, it started to like basically um, find different opportunities to meet with other couples who therapists had told us, like, basically, hey, this couple's struggling, would you chat with them or go out to lunch with
mhm,
them?
mhm,
And kind of letting us take it from there. And
mhm.
so we had started to find ways to give back together, and I just
Oh,
realized
cool.
that and I was still working, I don't remember exactly how long I had
Mm,
really, since last time I'd relapsed, been, but
mhm.
I realized like it didn't really matter. I had a lot of these insights and learnings that
Yeah,
even if I was still working on myself,
right.
I actually find a lot of benefit from
Mhm,
starting to figure out how to turn outwards and how to help other people and let them help me. And
mhm,
I think that's been the big insight too with Relay. Is it's not that I'm an expert, it's that I'm I'm in the same boat as everyone
Right.
else. And these are
Right.
learnings that I've had that hopefully a lot of people can relate to. And it's been an awesome way for me to continue working on my recovery and my
Yeah.
healing.
Well, and it's helped me a lot. I had to get myself straight beforehand for sure, and I had to do the work ahead of time. And what I tell clients is like, I've got some sobriety under my belt, but if you'd ask me like, hey Zach, are you gonna be sober for the next 50 years? I'm gonna be like, bro, I hope so. I'm trying, man.
Yeah, no,
I'm like, I'm trying, dude. I
this is
really
not
am.
from a place of like we know how to do these things perfectly every single day. Yeah, no, like
Yeah.
every day I'm still like, oh man, like I realized I wasn't aware that I was feeling like these stressors and triggers, and like
Right.
I'm on this podcast talking about the psychology of the brain with you, and I totally botched my understanding of that in practice yesterday, and
It's
but
easy to
yeah,
do.
yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
that's easy to do. So, you know, how do you feel like this software is different from some of the other ones you've come across that you've seen, or did you not really find anything like the stuff you created, which is why you created it?
Well, yeah, I guess a little bit of both. I mean, there are other apps out there to help people quit all sorts of things, including
Mm,
pornography. I think a lot of them have taken the approach of trying to be a standalone solution, of really trying to appeal to people that maybe want to start by just finding an app that can
mm,
help them do it and not have
mm,
to go to a group or work with a coach or go to the
mm.
therapist or whatever. And I think we really saw that people who are going to groups and are working with therapists or are listening to podcasts, all these things, um, like what if we didn't try to be the standalone option as an app, but
Mm.
what if we tried to help fill the gaps that could plug into some of these existing programs and resources
Yeah.
better? And so
Mm.
that's where I think we didn't really see anything trying to do that and really focusing on the group-based component, because a lot of everything else that we saw focused so much on the curriculum and the education that you need to learn, that I think is really powerful and super important. Where we were trying to bring our unique strength is, well, our background and what we're passionate about is the connection and the community element and the group
Mm.
aspects of things, and focusing on that front and center with our app is something that I think is very different than other type of app-based tools for
Yeah.
recovery that are largely focused on tracking and curriculum.
That's cool, man. Yeah, and that's why, it's kind of like why we offer a bunch of different things, because it is what it is. Like, you need the information, so that's like the 90-day program we offer. It's like you need the information on how to get out, and then you need the help, which is why we have groups, which is why we have coaching.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
you need the help, you need the community. And then something like what you have is like, we can't all be around every second of the day, and so like having something that acts like a supplement is so good. Out of curiosity, how old are you now, Chandler?
so I'm 25. Yeah.
25? Bro, you're
Yep.
so young and you're killing it, man. Creating this
Oh
software,
no.
working on yourself, man. That's great, dude. You're a lot further
Well,
along than I was at 25. You're killing
I have a
it, man.
lot I have a lot to learn. I have a lot to learn, but no, I mean, coming out of college and choosing to do this full time as opposed
Mhm.
to like all three of my friends who we started this together, we had other jobs that were
Mhm.
not related to this at all. And we all just felt like really deeply that um this vision of trying to help people find healing together,
Mhm.
and being a tool that helps enable that better, is something that is really meaningful to us and helps us try to become better every day. Like I said, we're not experts and we haven't got it all figured out, but yeah, man, it's been awesome. It's really cool. So yeah, we have like 1,500 people using the app today. About half of
Oh,
them are
cool.
in various programs like your guys's and
Mhm.
are using this as the supplement, and the other half of
Right.
them are people that are maybe just starting out on their recovery journey,
Dipping their
and
toes in
they're,
the water.
yeah,
Mhm.
dipping their toes in the water, and we help make it really non-awkward and non-scary to get matched into that group,
Yeah.
and still preserving anonymity
Yeah, it's a tough
while
word,
also
bro. That was a bold
finding
move
that.
to try to use that
Oh,
word.
dude, yeah. While also helping them find real connection. So yeah, I think part of the fun has been actually talking to people using the app and getting feedback and saying, how can this help better enable your accountability, your responsibility in your recovery journey, and how can we help this enable your human connection with your group members? And so there's been a lot of changes that we're we've made and are working on to the app, and it's a process, man, but it's fun.
That's great, man. Well, thanks for joining us today, Chandler. I appreciate it, man. A lot of fun. It's good meeting you. Good talking to you.
Zach.
I hope everyone got something out of this, man. You know, if you're looking for a takeaway, join a group. That's the moral. Like, do it. Like, you got two guys here that have benefited from it. You know, we're not telling you to do anything that we haven't done ourselves. And if you're trying to get better at anything, like if you want to try to get better at basketball, you go and you train with somebody who's played basketball a long time. Same in business, same in whatever, you know, like, and so if you have people who are further along in the journey and they're like, bro, you've got to go to a group, like, just do it. Just listen.
Probably,
all right.
Probably a good hint. Yeah.
It's a good hint if you got a bunch of people who are like, just so you know, here's the things that are kind of awkward about it, but once you get past the awkwardness, it's very helpful. So thanks everybody for joining us at Porn Brain Rewire today. Once again, click that subscribe button or the follow button, and remember to control your brain or it will control you. Thanks everybody.